The last flight, when 8-year-old Tommy woke up screaming at 3:17 a.m., describing in vivid detail how the left engine had caught fire and the cabin had filled with smoke. His father, Mark, initially thought it was just another nightmare. But when Tommy looked at him with eyes full of adult terror and whispered, "Dad, I need to tell someone what really happened on Flight 447 before I forget," Mark's blood turned to ice. Tommy had never been on a plane in his young life. They lived in rural Montana, hundreds of miles from the nearest airport, and the family had never traveled beyond the neighboring states. Yet here was his 8-year-old son describing the sensation of an aircraft losing altitude with the precision of someone who had lived through it. The oxygen masks dropped down, but mine was tangled, Tommy continued, his small voice shaking. I tried to help the lady next to me, but she was already unconscious. The pilot kept saying everything would be okay, but I could hear the fear in his voice through the intercom. Mark sat on the edge of Tommy's bed, his heart hammering. "Tommy, where did you hear about Flight 447? Tommy looked at him with confusion that seemed genuine. "I didn't hear about it, Dad. I was there. I was in seat 23B, next to the window. I remember because I specifically asked for a window seat when I booked the flight." He paused, his young face creasing with concentration. "My name was James Morrison then. I was flying home to see my daughter graduate from college." The specificity of the details made Mark's skin crawl. This wasn't the vague, fantastical storytelling of a child's imagination. This was the precise recollection of someone who had experienced trauma. "Tommy, you're 8 years old. You don't book flights or have daughters." "I know that," Tommy said, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious. "I'm Tommy now. But before I was Tommy, I was James. And James died when Flight 447 crashed into the mountains." Mark spent the rest of the night sitting in his kitchen, laptop open, searching for any information about Flight 447. What he found made his hands shake so violently he could barely type. American Airlines Flight 447 had crashed in the Colorado Rockies on March 15, 2019, exactly 9 months before Tommy was born. All 127 passengers and crew members had been killed when the aircraft encountered severe turbulence and mechanical failure during a winter storm. Among the victims was James Morrison, 52, of Denver, Colorado. He had been traveling to attend his daughter's graduation from the University of California. He had been seated in 23B. The next morning. Mark called in sick to work and drove Tommy to see Dr. Sarah Chun, a child psychologist in the nearest city. He'd known Dr. Chun since college, and if anyone could help him make sense of what was happening, it would be her. "Tommy," Dr. Chun said gently, settling into her chair across from the boy, "your dad tells me you've been having some very vivid dreams about flying." Tommy shook his head seriously. "They're not dreams, Dr. Chun. Dreams feel different. This feels like remembering." He looked out the window at a plane passing overhead, and Mark saw him shudder. "I remember everything about that day. I remember being excited to see Katie graduate. I remember the turbulence starting about an hour into the flight, and how the flight attendants tried to keep everyone calm." "Tell me about Katie," Dr. Chun said, making notes. Tommy's face lit up with a smile that seemed far too mature for his young features. "She was my pride and joy. 22 years old, studying to be a veterinarian. She looked just like her mother. Same red hair, same green eyes, same stubborn streak." His expression grew sad. "I was so proud of her. She was the first person in our family to graduate from college." Dr. Chun exchanged a meaningful look with Mark. "Tommy, what else do you remember about James's life?" "Everything," Tommy said simply. "I remember growing up in a small town in Kansas, joining the Army when I was 18, meeting my wife Linda at a USO dance. I remember Katie being born, and how scared I was that I wouldn't be a good father. He paused, his young voice heavy with adult emotion. I remember the divorce and how hard it was to only see Katie on weekends. I remember working construction for 30 years, saving every penny so I could help pay for her college. The details poured out of him with startling accuracy. He described James Morrison's childhood home, his military service, his marriage and divorce, his relationship with his daughter. He spoke about coworkers by name, recalled specific conversations, even mentioned a scar on James's left knee from a construction accident. "Tommy," Dr. Chon said carefully, "how do you feel about these memories?" Tommy considered the question seriously. "Sad, mostly. James had a good life, but it ended too soon. He never got to see Katie graduate, never got to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, never got to meet his grandchildren." Tears began to well up in his eyes. "But also grateful, I guess, because I know that James's love for Katie didn't die with him. It's still here in me." Dr. Chun spent the next several sessions with Tommy, documenting his memories and cross-referencing them with publicly available information about James Morrison and Flight 447. The accuracy was unsettling. Tommy knew details about James's life that had never been reported in the media, personal information that only family members would know. But it was Tommy's description of the crash itself that proved most compelling and most disturbing. The first sign of trouble was the turbulence. Tommy explained during one session, his young hands gripping the arms of his chair. It started as normal bumps, the kind you expect when flying through clouds. But then it got worse. Much worse. The plane was shaking so hard that people's drinks were spilling, and the overhead compartments started opening. His voice took on the measured tone of someone giving testimony. Then we heard this loud bang from the left side of the plane. I looked out my window and saw flames coming from the engine. Orange and red flames streaming back along the wing. Dr. Chun made careful notes as Tommy continued his account. The pilot came on the intercom and said we were experiencing mechanical difficulties and would be making an emergency landing. But I could tell from his voice that it was worse than he was letting on. The plane was losing altitude fast, and the nose kept dipping down no matter how hard they tried to level it out. Tommy's breathing became rapid and shallow as he relived the memory. People started crying and praying. The woman next to me, her name was Margaret. She was going to visit her new grandson. She grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go. I told her everything would be okay, but I didn't believe it myself. What happened next, Tommy? The oxygen masks dropped down. That's when people really started to panic, because everyone knew that meant we were in serious trouble. Mine got tangled in the seat back, and I was struggling to get it free when the plane suddenly dropped. Not just turbulence, it felt like we were falling. Tommy's young face was pale with remembered terror. I could see the mountains getting closer through the window, snow-covered peaks that looked beautiful and terrible at the same time. I remember thinking that Katie would never know how much I loved her, that I'd never get to tell her how proud I was. His voice broke. In those last few seconds, I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking about her, about how she'd feel when she found out. I was thinking about all the things I'd never get to say, all the moments we'd never share. Dr. Chun had to take a break. The raw emotion in Tommy's voice, the adult understanding of mortality coming from an 8-year-old child, was almost too much to bear. When they resumed, Tommy's demeanor had shifted. The terror was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. The impact was quick, he said quietly. There was this moment of incredible noise and chaos, and then silence. Not scary silence, but peaceful silence. Like finally being able to rest after being very, very tired. What happened after that? Tommy tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. There was light. Warm, golden light that felt like love itself. And I wasn't alone. There were other people there, people from the plane, but also others. People I'd known who had died before me. His young face took on an expression of wonder. My mom was there. She'd been dead for 10 years, but she looked exactly like I remembered her. She hugged me and told me that everything was okay, that Katie would be okay too. Did you want to stay there? Yes and no, Tommy said thoughtfully. It was beautiful and peaceful, and I felt happier than I'd ever felt in life. But I also felt ... unfinished, like there were things I still needed to do, people I still needed to help. He looked directly at Dr. Chun. That's when they told me I could come back, but it would be different. I wouldn't be James anymore. I'd be someone new, with a new family and a new life to live. But I could carry James's memories with me, at least for a while, so that his story wouldn't be completely lost. Mark, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally found his voice. Tommy, are you saying you chose to be reborn? Tommy nodded seriously. Not exactly chose, but ... agreed to it. They said there were people who needed to know what really happened on Flight 447, and that James's love for Katie was too strong to just disappear. So I came back to tell the story. Dr. Chun leaned forward. Tommy, is there something specific you think people need to know about the crash? Tommy was quiet for a long moment, his young brow furrowed in concentration. The pilot did everything. He could. Captain Rodriguez. He was a good man with 30 years of experience. When the engine failed and the hydraulics went out, he and his co-pilot fought to save that plane right up until the last second. His voice grew stronger, more urgent. People blamed them afterward. The investigation said it was pilot error, but that's not true. The plane had a mechanical failure that no one could have predicted or prevented. Captain Rodriguez died trying to save us all. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. How do you know about the investigation? I don't know how I know, Tommy admitted. I just do. Sometimes information comes to me, like someone is whispering it in my ear. And they're telling me that Captain Rodriguez's family needs to know the truth. His son Miguel became a pilot too, but he's been carrying guilt about his father's reputation. He needs to know that his dad was a hero. Dr. Chun made more notes, her mind racing. If Tommy's account was accurate, it could potentially impact the official investigation into Flight 447. But how could they verify information that came from such an impossible source? Tommy, is there anything else you think people need to know? Tommy nodded solemnly. Katie needs to know that her father's last thoughts were of her. She's been blaming herself, thinking that if she hadn't insisted on having the graduation ceremony, he wouldn't have been on that plane. But James was so proud of her, so excited to be there. He wouldn't have missed it for anything. Tears were streaming down Tommy's cheeks now. She needs to know that he's still proud of her. She became a veterinarian just like she planned, and she's helping animals every day. She got married last year to a good man who makes her laugh. James sees all of it, and he's so happy for her. Mark reached over and took his son's hand. How do you know all this about Katie? Because love doesn't die, Tommy said simply. James's love for Katie is still alive, still watching over her. That's why I remember, so I can tell her that she's not alone, that her father's love is still with her. Over the following weeks, Dr. Chun worked with Mark to verify as many of Tommy's claims as possible. They contacted the National Transportation Safety Board, spoke with families of other crash victims, and even reached out to Katie Morrison, now Katie Sullivan, in California. Conversation with Katie was perhaps the most emotionally charged of all. When Mark explained the situation and shared some of Tommy's memories, Katie broke down completely. He knows about my wedding, she sobbed over the phone. He knows about my husband's name, about my job, about things I've never told anyone. How is that possible? I don't know, Mark admitted. But Katie, he wanted you to know that your father was thinking of you at the end, that he was proud of you and excited to see you graduate. I've carried so much guilt, Katie whispered. If I hadn't insisted on the ceremony, if I just accepted my diploma in the mail ... Tommy says your father wouldn't have missed it for anything. That being there for you was the most important thing in the world to him. The conversation lasted for hours, with Katie asking specific questions that only her father would know the answers to. Tommy, speaking through Mark, answered them all with startling accuracy. By the end of the call, Katie was convinced that somehow, impossibly, her father's spirit was speaking through this 8-year-old boy in Montana. Can I talk to him? She asked finally. Can I talk to Tommy? The video call was arranged for the following weekend. When Katie's face appeared on the screen and she saw Tommy for the first time, she gasped. You have his eyes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Dad's eyes. Tommy smiled gently. Hi, Katie. I've missed you so much. Dad, is it really you? It's me, sweetheart. I'm different now, but it's still me. Tommy's young voice carried all the warmth and love of a father speaking to his beloved daughter. I'm so proud of you. You became everything I knew you could be. They talked for over an hour, with Tommy sharing memories that only James Morrison could have known. He told Katie about the time she broke her arm falling out of the apple tree in their backyard, about the song he used to sing to her when she had nightmares, about the promise he'd made to always be there for her, no matter what. I know I can't be there the way I used to be, Tommy said finally. But I want you to know that love doesn't end when life does. I'm still your dad, and I'm still watching over you, and I'm still so very proud of the woman you've become. Katie wiped her eyes, smiling through her tears. I love you too, Dad. Thank you for finding a way to come back and tell me. As the months passed, Tommy's memories of being James Morrison began to fade, just as he had predicted they would. But the impact of his story continued to ripple outward. Captain Rodriguez's family received vindication when Tommy's account of the crash led to a reinvestigation that cleared the pilot's name. Katie found peace and closure, finally able to let go of her guilt and embrace the joy in her life. And Tommy himself began to settle more fully into being just Tommy, a bright, compassionate 8-year-old with an unusual capacity for empathy and a deep understanding of how precious life truly is. Do you miss being James? Mark asked his son one evening as they watched the sunset from their porch. Tommy considered the question carefully. Sometimes I miss the feeling of being Katie's dad, of having that special connection with her. But I'm grateful for the time I had with those memories, and I'm grateful that I could help people find peace. He leaned against his father's shoulder. Besides, I have my own life to live now, my own family to love, my own dreams to chase. James's story is finished, but mine is just beginning. Mark hugged his son tightly, marveling at the wisdom contained in such a small body. I love you, Tommy. I love you too, Dad. And I promise, this time, I'm not going anywhere. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Mark reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment his son had carried. The memories of a stranger's love and loss had served as a bridge between the living and the dead, had brought healing to people he'd never met in his current lifetime. It defied every rational explanation, challenged every assumption about the nature of life and death and consciousness itself. But it had also revealed truths about the enduring power of love, the unbreakable bonds between parent and child, and the mysterious ways that the universe sometimes allows us to reach across the veil to comfort those we've left behind. Tommy slept peacefully that night, his dreams filled not with memories of plane crashes and final moments, but with hopes for the future and the simple joy of being alive. And somewhere in the space between what we can prove and what we choose to believe, James Morrison finally found the peace he'd been seeking, knowing that his love for his daughter had found a way to transcend death itself, and that the most important message of all had been delivered. Love never truly dies. If stories like Tommy's move you as deeply as they move me, please subscribe to our channel. We explore the mysteries of consciousness, the unexplained connections between life and death, and the remarkable ways that love finds expression even in the most impossible circumstances. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these incredible tales that remind us that there's still so much we don't understand about the human experience, and that sometimes the most impossible stories carry the most important truths about what it means to be alive.